The church bell tolled with the kind of cheer only a small frontier town could summon. Painted white but fading under years of sun and dust, the chapel stood proud against the endless prairie. Folks from every corner of Dry Creek had dressed in their finest to witness the marriage of Miss Caroline Whitmore, the golden-haired daughter of the town's banker, to Thomas Blake, a young rancher who'd spent months saving for this very day. Caroline was radiant. Her blonde hair shone in the light that spilled through the stained-glass window, and her dress, sewn by her own hands with her mother's lace, glimmered with a simple elegance. She stood at the altar beside Thomas, his chest puffed with pride, his calloused hands trembling as he held hers. For a moment, the whole town felt stitched together by their joy. The preacher's voice rang out, steady and solemn. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." But in the Wild West, peace had a habit of shattering too soon. The church doors burst open with a deafening crack, slamming against the walls. Dust swept in, and with it, a half-dozen men on horseback outside, their rifles gleaming, their eyes masked by bandanas. Inside the chapel, the congregation froze. Mothers clutched children. Men instinctively reached for pistols that had been left at home out of respect for the Lord's house. The leader of the gang, broad-shouldered, wearing a black hat pulled low, strode in with his revolver drawn. His voice was gravel-laced with cruelty. "Y'all keep real quiet, and maybe we'll let some of you live." The preacher stammered, "Sir, this is the house of God." A gunshot cracked, echoing against the wooden beams. The preacher fell where he stood, blood staining the Bible he'd been clutching. Screams erupted, women shielding their faces, men ducking under pews. The gang fired into the air, herding the terrified townsfolk back like cattle. Thomas shoved Caroline behind him, his jaw tight with fury. "You're not talking her." The bandit leader laughed coldly. "Ain't that sweet?" Before Caroline could scream, the outlaw fired. Thomas staggered back, clutching his chest, eyes wide in disbelief. He fell at Caroline's feet, crimson spreading across his white shirt. "No!" Caroline's cry ripped through the chaos, raw and broken. She dropped to her knees, grasping at Thomas, but his eyes had already dimmed. The leader yanked her up by the arm. "We got what we came for, boys. Let's ride." Two bandits dragged Caroline out as she kicked and clawed, her sobs drowned by gunfire. The outlaws mounted up, dragging her onto a horse as the survivors inside wailed over the dead and wounded. In moments, the dust cloud of their departure hung over the town like a curse. But unseen by most, there was someone else watching. From the ridge overlooking Dry Creek, a Cherokee warrior named Dakota had seen it unfold. He had ridden into town that morning to trade pelts for ammunition and flour. His dark eyes, sharp as hawks, had caught sight of the pretty blonde stepping into the church, her smile as bright as the morning sun. He hadn't lingered, he wasn't welcome inside white churches, not even for a wedding, but he had stayed close enough to sense trouble. Now, with the echo of gunfire still rolling across the valley, Dakota's hands clenched around his horse's reins. He saw the gang tearing away with their prize, the woman slumped and struggling in their grasp. His blood stirred. Dakota was no stranger to violence. He had lost family to raids, had fought men who looked just like those bandits, men who believed the prairie belonged only to their kind. But this was cruelty without honor. He pressed his heels to his horse's flanks. Ha! The animal surged forward down the ridge, hooves striking sparks against rock. Dakota's long black hair streamed behind him, his rifle bouncing against his back, his tomahawk strapped at his side. He kept low in the saddle, eyes fixed on the dust cloud of the fleeing gang. The bandits thought they had left chaos in their wake, but they didn't see the warrior closing the distance. Caroline, jolted by the horse's gallop, fought against the brute who held her. Her wrists were bound, her mouth gagged, but her spirit hadn't broken. Tears blurred her vision, yet she caught a flicker of movement behind them, a lone rider chasing fast. For a fleeting moment, hope sparked in her chest. The outlaws didn't notice until Dakota was nearly upon them. A warning shot cracked, whizzing past the gang's flank. The leader cursed and whipped his horse faster. "Riders behind! Get rid of him!" One of the bandits wheeled around, raising his rifle. But Dakota was already standing in his stirrups, bow drawn with an arrow he had pulled in one fluid motion. The string twanged. The arrow whistled true, striking the gunman square in the shoulder. He howled, tumbling off his horse. The others shouted in alarm. Caroline's captor tightened his grip, dragging her down against the saddle, but Tekoda's fury was unrelenting. Another arrow flew, this time grazing the hat off the leader's head. "Kill that savage!" the outlaw roared. Gunfire erupted, bullets whining past Tekoda. He zigzagged, urging his horse left and right, closing in. A shot clipped his arm, but he barely flinched. His focus was the blonde woman, the fear in her eyes, the way she struggled. With a shout, Tekoda spurred his horse harder and leapt alongside one of the riders. His tomahawk flashed in the sun, slamming into the bandit's chest. The man toppled lifeless to the ground. The gang began to falter, realizing this was no ordinary chase. They were being hunted. Caroline felt the grip on her loosen as her captor fumbled for his gun. She kicked with all her strength, knocking his hat askew. Tekoda seized the moment, ramming his horse against theirs. Both animals screamed, stumbling, but Tekoda reached out, grabbing Caroline's arm and pulling her toward him. For a heartbeat, she dangled between life and death, the bandit clawing at her skirts. Then she was free, swinging into Tekoda's saddle. She clung to him, breath ragged, tears soaking his shirt. The warrior turned his horse sharply, retreating toward the hills. Behind them, the leader cursed, firing shot after shot, but the distance grew wider. The outlaws gave chase for a time, then slowed, wary of the man who had cut them down so swiftly. By the time Tekoda reached the cover of the rocks, the gang had vanished back into the plains, their rage echoing faint in the wind. Caroline, trembling, lifted her face to look at her savior. Their eyes met, her blue as storm-washed sky, his dark as midnight earth. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the pounding of her heart against his chest. "You are safe now," Tekoda said finally, his voice deep, steady. But Caroline knew safety was only an illusion. She had seen her husband die, her town burn with grief. And the men who had taken her, they wouldn't stop. Not until they had her again. And so, in the wild lands beyond Dry Creek, an unlikely bond began. Tekoda guided his horse deep into the ravines that split the prairie like scars. The shadows there were cool, the air quiet except for the echoes of their ride. Caroline clung to him at first, hands gripping his chest so tightly he could feel the tremor in her fingers. Gradually, as the pounding of hooves faded behind them, her grip loosened. She lifted her head. Where are you taking me?" Her voice cracked, fragile as glass. "Somewhere safe," Tekoda replied. He dismounted near a stand of cottonwoods. The warrior moved with a quiet assurance, as though the land itself bent to his steps. He helped her down, though she nearly collapsed when her boots touched the ground. Caroline's eyes darted everywhere. The wilderness loomed vast and merciless compared to the orderly streets of Dry Creek. She hugged herself, shivering despite the sun. Tekoda knelt, slicing through the rope at her wrists with the edge of his knife. "You are free." She rubbed her raw skin, blinking back tears. "My husband, Thomas. They killed him right in front of me." Her voice broke, the memory too sharp. "And the preacher, and so many others. All gone." "Why?" Tekoda's gaze hardened. "Because they are wolves. They kill because they can. But wolves can bleed." Caroline studied him then, really seeing him for the first time. His dark hair brushed his shoulders, his jaw was strong, his eyes deep-set and unreadable. He was younger than she expected, perhaps no more than 25. His bare arms were marked with scars and paint, signs of battles fought long before today. "You risked your life for me," she whispered. "Why?" Tekoda considered. "I saw them take you. I could not let evil win." Caroline pressed her hand to her mouth, overwhelmed by grief and gratitude. Her world had been torn apart in the span of an hour. And yet, here stood this stranger, this warrior from a people most townsfolk whispered about with fear, offering her a sliver of hope. He built a small fire with flint and dry brush, his motions swift and sure. "Eat," he said, handing her a strip of dried venison from his pack. She took it with trembling hands, though her stomach clenched too tightly for hunger. Still she forced a bite, if only to keep her strength. "Do they know where we are?" she asked. Dakota shook his head. "They follow for a while, but I know the land. We are hidden." Caroline nodded, though unease coiled inside her. The bandits' leader had looked at her with something more than greed. He hadn't just wanted money. He had wanted her. She could still feel the burn of his hand on her arm, the malice in his laugh. She shuddered. Dakota noticed. "They will come again." The fire crackled between them, throwing shadows across the canyon walls. Caroline looked up sharply. "Then we can't just hide. We have to stop them." Dakota tilted his head, surprised at the steel in her tone. "You are strong," he said. Her lips trembled. "No, I'm not. I'm terrified. But if I keep running, they'll take me again. And I won't let that happen." The warrior studied her, weighing her spirit. He had seen settlers broken by less. Yet this woman, soft hands, golden hair, a dress torn and stained, refused to collapse. He respected that. Night fell slowly, stars pricking the velvet sky. Caroline sat wrapped in Dakota's blanket, staring at the flames. "Do you have family?" she asked softly. Dakota's jaw tightened. "Not anymore." She hesitated. "The white men." He nodded. His eyes flickered with memories, burned lodges, screams in the night, his mother's hand torn from his. He didn't speak the details. He never did. "I'm sorry," Caroline whispered. "Truly." Silence lingered. Then, almost as if to chase away ghosts, Dakota rose and scanned the horizon. "We must move at dawn. They will not stop." Caroline swallowed hard. "Where will we go? There are places they cannot track us." "But you—" He looked her over, at her delicate shoes, her pale skin unused to the harsh land. "You must be strong." She straightened her spine. "I can be." The next morning, they broke camp early. Dakota led on foot, guiding his horse along narrow trails cut by deer and buffalo. Caroline stumbled often, but he caught her each time, steadying her with a quiet hand. She felt clumsy beside him. He moved like water, silent and sure, while she tripped over rocks and brambles. Yet every time she faltered, he only offered his hand again, wordless, patient. By midday, they reached a high ridge. From there, they could see the prairie stretching endless, dotted with dust trails. Caroline stiffened when she spotted riders in the far distance. "They're still searching," she whispered. Dakota nodded grimly. "They want you." Caroline's throat tightened. "Why me?" He turned to her, expression unreadable. "Because you are beautiful. Because they think they can break you. But they are wrong." She blinked at his bluntness, a flush rising to her cheeks. She had heard compliments before, whispered in drawing rooms or murmured by Thomas in sweet tones. But from Dakota, the words landed different, raw, unpolished, true. "We should keep moving," she said quickly, looking away. They descended into another canyon, this one narrower, with walls rising high like fortress gates. Dakota led her to a hidden cave tucked behind a screen of brush. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of stone and earth. "This is where we rest," he said. Caroline sat on a smooth rock, pulling the blanket tighter around her. She was exhausted, but her mind raced. "What happens if they find us?" she asked. Dakota met her eyes, his voice low. "Then I kill them." There was no boast in his words, only certainty. She shivered, not from fear of him, but from the knowledge that he meant it. That night, as the firelight danced across the cave walls, Caroline found herself studying the warrior in secret. The sharp lines of his face, the scars carved into his skin, the quiet strength in the way he sat cross-legged, sharpening his knife. He was unlike anyone she had ever known. "Dakota," she said softly. He looked up. "Thank you for saving me." For the first time since they met, a faint smile touched his lips. "Do not thank me yet. The hunt is not finished." She held his gaze longer than she meant to. In the flickering firelight, something unspoken passed between them, a fragile thread, stretched thin but undeniable. And outside, beyond the canyon walls, the bandits sharpened their own knives, swearing vengeance on the warrior who had stolen their prize. The storm was far from over. Far across the prairie, a campfire burned hot against the evening dark. The bandits gathered there, their faces mean and sour under the flickering glow. The leader, Cyrus Kane, paced like a caged wolf, his black hat pushed back, his jaw tight. "She was right here," he snarled, kicking a whiskey bottle into the dirt. "Right here in my damn grasp," and some painted savage tore her away. The men muttered uneasily. They'd seen what the Cherokee could do. The speed, the precision of his arrows, it had rattled them. "He killed Jed and Martin like nothin'," one outlaw said, rubbing the welt where a bullet belt had grazed him. "Ain't no ordinary Injun." Cyrus's eyes burned like coals. "Don't matter what he is. That woman is mine. I saw the fire in her eyes. She's worth more than gold. Worth more than this whole rotten town. And I'll have her back, even if I gotta paint the prairie with blood." The men nodded reluctantly. They feared Cyrus more than the warrior. But deep in their gut, they knew a reckoning was coming. Back in the canyon cave, Caroline stirred from uneasy dreams. She had seen Thomas's face again, pale and bloodied, falling to the church floor. She woke with a gasp, pressing her hand to her mouth. The cave was quiet except for the soft crackle of embers. Dakota sat nearby, awake, his back against the stone wall. He had not slept. His gaze was steady, scanning the shadows outside. "You don't rest," Caroline whispered. "Rest is for when danger passes," he said simply. Her heart tightened. He carried himself like someone who had lived too many nights waiting for death. She pulled the blanket closer around her shoulders. "I can't just hide behind you forever," she said after a long silence. "If they come again, I need to fight." Dakota's brow furrowed. "You would fight." "Yes." Her voice trembled but held. "I don't know how, but I'll learn. Teach me." The warrior studied her for a moment, weighing her words. Then he gave a slow nod. "At first light." Morning came clear and sharp, the sun throwing gold across the canyon walls. Dakota stood with his bow in hand, showing her how to hold it. His fingers brushed hers as he adjusted her grip. "Like this," he murmured. Caroline's heart thudded, though she tried to focus. She drew the string, wincing at the pull on her arm. The arrow wobbled and fell short. Dakota gave a faint grunt that might have been amusement. Again. She tried. And again. Each time, the arrow flew a little truer. Sweat dampened her brow, but determination burned in her. She thought of Thomas, of the preacher, of the screaming in the church. Each arrow she loosed became a prayer for the dead. By midday, she managed to hit a crude target Dakota had carved into a tree. She laughed, surprised at the sound after so much sorrow. "You see," Dakota said, "strength is not only in arms. It is here." He touched his chest. Her smile faded into something softer. "You're a good teacher." He looked at her for a long moment, unreadable. Then he turned back to the target. Elsewhere, Cyrus Kane rode with 2 men scouting the ridges. He dismounted, scanning the ground. His eyes caught the faint outline of hoofprints leading into the canyon. He grinned, teeth yellow in the sun. "Gotcha." That evening, Caroline and Dakota sat by the fire again. She had gathered kindling herself, eager to contribute. As they ate, her thoughts drifted. "Do you believe in fate?" she asked suddenly. Dakota looked at her, puzzled. "I mean, do you think things happen for a reason? That maybe we're guided to certain paths?" He considered. "I believe the earth speaks. The wind, the river, the stars. They guide those who listen." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe the earth wanted you there at the church. To save me." His gaze softened, but he said nothing. Silence settled between them, warm and heavy. Caroline felt it, a pull, like the space between them was shrinking without either moving. She looked down quickly, her cheeks flushed. She was a widow now, her heart broken, but some part of her stirred at the warrior's presence. His strength, his quiet watchfulness, it made her feel both safe and unsteady. She pushed the thought away, ashamed of it. Yet she couldn't deny the spark. Dakota woke her before dawn the next day. "They are near." Her blood turned cold. "How do you know?" He pointed to the ridge, where a vulture wheeled over something fresh. Tracks too. Broken brush, the faint scuff of boots. The bandits were closing in. Caroline's hand tightened on the bow. Fear pressed against her chest, but beside it was resolve. She would not go quietly again. Dakota read her face. "Stay close to me." The sun rose, washing the canyon in blood-red light. Somewhere beyond the ridge, Cyrus Kane smiled as he cocked his revolver. The hunt had found them. The first shot cracked just as the sun's rim cleared the ridge. Stones splintered inches from Caroline's head. She ducked with a cry, clutching her bow. "Down!" Dakota hissed, pushing her behind a boulder. His rifle was in his hands before the echo faded. He fired once, twice, the sharp cracks ringing through the canyon. Shouts echoed from above. The bandits had them pinned from the high ground. "Savages down there!" one yelled. "Smoke him out!" Bullets rained against the rock, each strike showering chips of stone. Caroline pressed her hands over her ears, heart thundering. But Dakota was steady, crouched low, eyes scanning the ridge like a wolf tracking prey. "They'll surround us," he muttered. Caroline grabbed his arm. "Then what do we do?" He looked at her, calm despite the storm. "We fight." Her stomach knotted, but she nodded. Dakota handed her a pouch of arrows. "Stay behind cover. Wait for my signal." She swallowed hard and gripped the bow. Her hands trembled, but her spirit burned. A shadow moved on the ridge, a bandit creeping closer, pistol drawn. Dakota gave a low whistle. Caroline peeked, heart in her throat, and let an arrow fly. It struck the dirt near the outlaw's boots, but the man stumbled back in surprise. Dakota used the moment, his rifle barking. The bandit toppled, a cry cut short. Caroline gasped. She had been part of it. The terror was real, but so was the strange surge of strength. "Good," Dakota said, reloading swiftly. Again. Another shadow appeared. Caroline drew, released. This time her arrow scraped the outlaw's arm. He cursed and ducked back. Her breath came fast, but she looked at Dakota with a flicker of pride. He gave the smallest nod. Above them, Cyrus Kane crouched with two of his best men. His eyes gleamed when he spotted the blonde head moving behind the rocks. "She's here," he growled. "Alive. The Injun thinks he can keep her. We'll see about that." He motioned, and his men spread out, trying to flank the cave entrance. Dakota saw it. He grabbed Caroline's wrist. "We must move." "Where?" she whispered, panic rising. He pointed to a narrow chute in the canyon wall, barely visible behind brush. "There." Bullets whined as they sprinted. Caroline's skirt snagged on rocks. She tore it free, stumbling, but Dakota pulled her up, steady as ever. They scrambled into the chute, stones scraping their arms. The passage was tight, forcing them close. Caroline's breath came hot and fast against his shoulder. She felt the solid power of him as he pushed her forward, shielding her from the bullets striking the stone behind them. They burst out onto a ledge high above the canyon floor. The air was sharp, the view dizzying. Below, bandits cursed and scrambled, firing up but missing their mark. Caroline clung to the rock, trembling. "We're trapped." Dakota scanned the ledge. There was another chute leading down the far side, but it was steep. He looked at her, his eyes steady. "Do you trust me?" She met his gaze. Something inside her, something deeper than fear, answered, "Yes." He looped an arm around her waist. "Then hold tight." Before she could protest, he leapt from the ledge, boots slamming against the slope. They slid in a spray of gravel, half falling, half running. Caroline buried her face against his chest, clinging with all her might. The world blurred around her. They landed hard at the bottom, tumbling into the brush. For a moment, the world spun. Then Dakota hauled her upright, gripping her shoulders. "You are not hurt?" She shook her head, dazed. "No, I don't think so." "Good." He released her and turned, rifle ready. The bandits' shouts echoed above. They were furious, but the ledge slowed their pursuit. For now, Dakota and Caroline had a head start. They ran, weaving through the gullies until their lungs burned. At last, Dakota slowed, listening. The bandits' voices had faded, though not disappeared. "They will hunt until they have you," he said grimly. Caroline leaned against a rock, catching her breath. Sweat plastered her hair to her face, but her eyes blazed. "Then let them come. I won't be their victim again." Dakota looked at her, really looked. She was no longer just the delicate bride in white. Her dress was torn, her hands dirty, but her spirit burned fierce. Something stirred in his chest, something dangerous. "Your courage is strong," he said quietly. She met his gaze, her breath still ragged. "Because of you." For a moment, the air between them was charged. His hand almost lifted toward her face, but he pulled it back, jaw tightening. "We must keep moving," he said gruffly. They pressed on until dusk, finally reaching a hidden valley thick with cottonwoods. A stream trickled through, cool and clear. It was a haven, for the moment. Dakota built a fire, and Caroline helped, her hands clumsy but eager. When the flames crackled, they sat close, the day's terror still thrumming in their veins. Caroline stared into the fire. "I never thought I'd have blood on my hands," she whispered. "But when I shot that arrow, it felt right. Like I was fighting for more than just myself." Dakota nodded slowly. "You fought for your people, for the dead in the church, for the man you loved." Her eyes glistened. "Thomas," she swallowed hard. "He was a good man. He didn't deserve to die that way." Dakota was silent. He knew no words could heal that wound. Caroline's voice softened. "But if he were here, I think he'd tell me to fight. To live. To keep going." The warrior met her eyes. The firelight flickered between them, painting her face in gold and shadow. For a heartbeat, it felt like the rest of the world had fallen away. The bandits, the blood, the fear. There was only the two of them, bound by survival, by grief, by something unnamed growing in the quiet spaces. And yet, far away, Cyrus Kane plotted in the dark, vowing that the next sunrise would bring blood. The next morning broke with a strange stillness. Birds sang in the cottonwoods, and the little stream whispered across stones, but Caroline couldn't shake the prickle along her spine. It felt too calm, too quiet. Dakota crouched by the water, refilling his canteen. His hair, unbound, shimmered with droplets of dew. He looked wild and unyielding, like part of the land itself. Caroline found herself staring. In another life, she might have been embarrassed. Now, in this raw wilderness where every breath felt borrowed, she allowed herself the thought, "He saved me, and he's still saving me." Dakota caught her gaze, and for a flicker of a second, she didn't look away. Something passed between them, silent, heavy, alive. Then he said, "We must move. They will be near." Caroline exhaled, forcing herself back to the moment. "I'm ready." He studied her a moment, as though weighing not just her words but her soul. Finally, he nodded. "Then we walk." Hours later, they crept through a narrow gulch. The walls pressed close, their path shaded and damp. Caroline kept her bow ready, the string biting her fingers. She felt stronger now, still afraid, yes, but carrying that fear like a stone in her pocket instead of letting it drag her down. But Dakota suddenly raised his hand. He crouched low, sniffed the air, then touched the dirt. Caroline held her breath. "Tracks," he murmured. "Bandits." He nodded once. His jaw set. Too close. They backtracked, slipping into a side path. The gulch widened into an open meadow, tall grass rippling in the wind. Caroline almost relaxed, until the gunshot rang out. The grass exploded with riders. Cyrus Kane and his men thundered forward, rifles flashing, whooping with savage joy. Caroline's heart seized. She spun, loosing an arrow wildly. One bandit yelped as it grazed his leg, his horse stumbling. "Run!" Dakota roared. They bolted across the meadow, bullets tearing through the grass. Horses gained fast, hooves pounding like drums of war. Dakota fired over his shoulder, dropping one rider. Another arrow from Caroline struck true, embedding in a horse's flank. The animal reared, throwing its rider into the dirt. But Cyrus kept coming, eyes locked on Caroline with a feverish hunger. "Mine!" he bellowed. Dakota pulled Caroline toward a cluster of rocks. They scrambled up, breath ragged. The bandits circled below, jeering, shots sparking off the stone. Trapped. Dakota pressed his back to the rock, scanning for escape. Caroline clutched her last arrow, shaking but defiant. "They've got us," she whispered. "No," he growled. "Not yet." But even his eyes betrayed the truth. Their odds were fading. Cyrus dismounted, swaggering closer. His men kept their guns trained. "Well, well," he sneered, voice carrying across the rocks. "The runaway bride and her Injun knight. Quite the pair." Caroline's stomach turned at his leer. "You think you can keep her, savage?" Cyrus spat. "She ain't yours. She never will be. She's mine." Dakota's jaw flexed. "She belongs to no man." Cyrus laughed harshly. "She belonged to that pretty ranch boy, till I put a bullet in him. And she'll belong to me next." Caroline's hands shook with fury. She stood, arrow-notched, her voice sharp as steel. "I will never belong to you." The laughter died from Cyrus's face. His eyes narrowed, cold as a snake's. "You'll change your mind," he said softly, "after I cut that savage down and leave his carcass for the crows." He raised his pistol. The world slowed. Caroline saw the glint of metal, heard her own heartbeat drum in her ears. Dakota stepped forward, tall and unyielding, rifle ready. But before either man could fire, a thunderclap shook the meadow. Dark clouds had rolled in unseen, and lightning forked across the sky. Rain burst down, sudden and heavy, blinding the bandits. Horses screamed, rearing in panic. Gunpowder hissed damp in the storm. "Now!" Dakota barked. He grabbed Caroline's hand, pulling her through the chaos. They scrambled down the far side of the rocks, slipping in the mud, but alive. Bullets cracked behind them, wild and desperate. One grazed Dakota's side. He grunted, staggering, but kept moving. Caroline's heart lurched. Blood streaked his shirt, but his grip on her hand never faltered. They fled into the storm, vanishing into the sheets of rain. Hours later, soaked to the bone, they collapsed beneath an overhang of stone. Dakota's wound bled steadily. Caroline ripped a strip from her ruined dress, pressing it against his side. "Hold still," she whispered. He hissed through his teeth but didn't push her away. She tied the cloth tight, hands trembling but determined. "You saved me again," she murmured. His eyes met hers, dark and intense. Rain dripped from his hair, tracing the hard lines of his face. "You fight for yourself now," he said, voice low. "That is strength." Her breath caught. She realized how close they were, her hands still on him, her face inches from his. The fire between them, unspoken until now, flared hot. For a heartbeat, she thought he might close the distance. Her chest ached with the possibility. But he looked away, pulling back, jaw clenched. "We must keep moving," he said hoarsely. Caroline's heart hammered, torn between relief and disappointment. She turned her face from him, staring into the rain. But she knew the truth. Something had changed between them. Something neither bullets nor storms could wash away. And Cyrus Kane, even as he cursed the storm, swore he would tear that bond apart with his own hands. The storm raged all through the night. The thunder rolled like cannon fire over the plains, and every flash of lightning carved the world into a ghostly white. Caroline and Dakota stayed huddled beneath the rocky overhang, cold and wet, but alive. Dakota sat against the stone, eyes closed, his breathing slow and controlled despite the wound at his side. Caroline checked the makeshift bandage by the faint glow of dawn. It was soaked through, but the bleeding had slowed. Relief loosened the knot in her chest. "You should rest," she whispered. "I will when it is safe," he replied, his voice low and steady. Caroline almost smiled. Even bleeding, half dead with exhaustion, he carried himself with the dignity of a chief. She had never known a man like him. Her gaze softened. "Why did you help me, Dakota? You could have let those men take me. You didn't owe me anything." He opened his eyes, dark and unreadable. For a long moment he didn't answer. Then, quietly, "My people know what it is to have what we love stolen. You were taken. I could not allow it." Caroline swallowed hard. The weight of his words struck deep. She thought of her fiancé lying lifeless in the church, of her own life ripped apart in an instant. She understood. "Thank you," she said simply. He inclined his head, accepting the words without ceremony. By midday the rain broke. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, sharp and clean. Mist clung to the hills. Dakota moved carefully, conserving his strength, but refused to stop. "The storm slowed them," he explained. "But Cain will not quit. He hunts with obsession. We must end this." Caroline felt her stomach tighten. "End it." "Yes. We cannot run forever. He will follow. Always." The truth of it chilled her. Cyrus wasn't a man who forgot insults. Not after she'd stood defiant in his face. Not after Dakota had humiliated him twice. "How?" she asked. Dakota's eyes hardened. "We choose the ground. A place where their numbers mean nothing. Then we fight." Caroline's breath caught. The thought terrified her, yet something inside stirred too, an ember of defiance. She had been running, hiding, clinging to survival. Maybe it was time to turn and face the devil himself. "All right," she whispered. "We fight." By dusk they found their battleground, a narrow canyon cut through red stone, with only one entrance wide enough for riders. A shallow stream ran through it, its banks choked with brush. To either side, jagged cliffs loomed high, perfect for cover. "They must come through here," Dakota said. "We will be waiting." They worked together in silence, setting snares, placing stones for cover, gathering what weapons they had. Caroline's hands blistered and bled, but she never slowed. Each knot she tied, each stone she moved, fed her resolve. When they were done, they sat by the stream. The sky above blazed with stars, cold and bright. Caroline's muscles ached, but her heart beat steady. She looked at Dakota, his profile etched against the firelight. A scar ran along his jaw, faint but fierce. He looked like the kind of man legends were made of. "Were you always this brave?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Bravery is not born. It is chosen when fear comes." She let the words settle, then admitted, "I've been afraid since the church. Afraid I'd never breathe free air again." He turned to her. "Yet you fight beside me." Her chest tightened. "Because of you." The silence between them deepened, charged. His gaze lingered, and for a heartbeat Caroline thought he might reach for her hand. Her heart thundered with a hope she didn't dare name. But instead he looked away, his voice rough. "Sleep now. Tomorrow he comes." Caroline lay back on the cold ground, staring at the stars. Sleep didn't come easy. When it did, it was filled with dreams of fire and blood, and of Dakota's eyes holding hers across the storm. At dawn, the sound came, the faint echo of hooves, carried on the wind. Caroline snapped awake. Dakota was already crouched by the canyon mouth, rifle in hand. His expression was carved in stone. "They are here," he said. The hooves grew louder. Dust plumed at the horizon. Caroline's hands shook as she gripped her bow. "Stay low," Dakota commanded. The first riders appeared, silhouetted against the rising sun. Cyrus Cain led them, tall in the saddle, his pale hair gleaming like a banner. His eyes burned when he spotted the canyon. "There!" he roared. "They're cornered!" The bandits charged. Dakota fired. One man toppled from his horse before they even reached the canyon mouth. Caroline loosed an arrow, striking another through the throat. The narrow gap funneled them into chaos, horses colliding, men shouting. Gunfire cracked. Sparks flew from stone. Caroline ducked behind cover, heart hammering. She drew, loosed, drew again, each arrow flying straighter than the last. Dakota's rifle barked steadily, each shot deliberate, deadly. The bandits faltered, forced to dismount and scramble forward on foot. That was when the traps snapped shut. A hidden snare yanked one man screaming into the air. Another stumbled into a pit lined with sharpened stakes. The brush concealed their every step, turning the canyon into a death maze. Still, Cyrus pressed on, firing wildly, screaming her name. "Caroline!" His voice echoed like a curse. "You're mine." She felt her blood run cold. She loosed another arrow, but he ducked, snarling. "Dakota!" she cried. He was already moving, reloading with calm precision, his wound forgotten. He fired. Cyrus's hat spun into the dust, but the man himself stood grinning, untouched. The air reeked of smoke, blood, and dust. Caroline's arms ached, her quiver nearly empty. Dakota's rifle clicked dry. The bandits closed in. And then, Cyrus Kane stepped forward, revolver gleaming, eyes blazing with hate. "This ends now," he bellowed. The canyon had gone silent, except for the creak of Cyrus Kane's boots on gravel and the labored breathing of his few surviving men. Dust clung to his face, streaked with sweat and blood, but his grin never wavered. His revolver gleamed, steady in his hand, aimed squarely at Dakota. Caroline's heart slammed against her ribs. She clutched her last arrow, though her hands trembled. She could see the madness in Cyrus's eyes. This wasn't about money or revenge. It was obsession. "You're cornered, savage," Cyrus sneered, spitting into the dirt. "One shot, and you're done. Then the lady comes with me." Dakota rose slowly from cover, his body tall, unyielding, even with blood soaking his side. He leveled his gaze at Cyrus, calm as a stone in the storm. "You kill me," Dakota said, voice low and sharp, "and she will cut your heart before the sun sets." Caroline's breath caught. Cyrus barked out a harsh laugh. "That's cute. Maybe I'll keep her around long enough to see just how much she breaks without you." He thumbed the hammer back on his revolver. The click rang like a death knell. In that instant, Caroline moved. With a cry torn from her very soul, she loosed her last arrow. It streaked through the dust, true as lightning, and buried itself in Cyrus's shoulder. He roared, stumbling back, his revolver firing wild into the cliff. Dakota surged forward, closing the distance in a blur. He slammed into Cyrus, the revolver skittering across the stones. The two men grappled in the dirt, raw and vicious. Fists crashed against bone. Cyrus's strength was fueled by rage, but Dakota fought with a steady fire of purpose. Caroline scrambled to her feet, grabbing a fallen pistol, hands slick with sweat. She raised it, but the fight twisted too close, too fast. She couldn't risk hitting Dakota. "Caroline!" Dakota's voice was hoarse, straining. Cyrus had a knife now, flashing in the morning light, driving it down toward Dakota's chest. "No!" Caroline screamed. She lunged, slamming the pistols but into Cyrus's head. He staggered, dazed, and Dakota seized the moment, snapping the bandit's wrist, sending the knife clattering. Then, with one final savage motion, Dakota drove Cyrus backward, pinning him against the canyon wall. His hand closed around the bandit's throat. Cyrus clawed and spat, eyes wide with hate. "She's mine," he gasped. Dakota's voice was like thunder. "She is free." With a wrenching twist, he hurled Cyrus to the ground. The bandit leader hit hard, breath shattering from his lungs. Dakota snatched up the knife, driving it deep into the earth beside Cyrus's head, so close the man froze in terror. "Leave him," Caroline whispered, her voice shaking. "He doesn't deserve your hands." Dakota hesitated. Then, slowly, he rose, leaving Cyrus broken in the dust. The last of Cain's men, seeing their leader undone, fled without another word. The canyon fell quiet once more, save for the whisper of the stream. Caroline dropped the pistol, her knees buckling. Dakota caught her before she hit the ground, steadying her in his arms. "You are safe," he murmured. She looked up into his eyes, tears streaking her dirt-stained face. "Because of you." For the first time, his expression softened. His hand brushed against her cheek, hesitant, reverent. And then, finally, he kissed her. It was fierce, desperate, the kiss of two souls who had fought through blood and fire to find each other alive. Caroline clung to him, her heart hammering with something that felt like both freedom and belonging. When they broke apart, she whispered, "What now?" Dakota glanced down the canyon, where Cyrus lay groaning in the dust, beaten but alive. His voice was quiet, resolute. "Now you choose. Where you go. What you want." Caroline thought of the church, of the life that had been stolen. She thought of Cyrus's chains, and of Dakota's strength, his quiet fire. She knew her choice. "I want to walk beside you," she said softly. Dakota's eyes searched hers, as if testing whether she truly meant it. And when he found only truth, he nodded once, firm and sure. By the time they emerged from the canyon, the sun was high. The land stretched wide and endless before them, golden under the sky. Behind them, Cyrus Cain's empire had crumbled in the dust. Ahead, the horizon beckoned, wild, uncertain, but theirs to claim. Caroline reached for Dakota's hand. He didn't pull away. Together, they walked on. Epilogue. Weeks later, whispers spread through the saloons and homesteads of the frontier. Of how Cyrus Cain's gang was broken in a red canyon. Of how a Cherokee warrior and a golden-haired bride fought side by side and lived to tell the tale. Some said the woman had turned into a sharpshooter herself, fierce as any outlaw. Others said the warrior had vanished into the hills with her at his side, leaving only legends behind. But those who saw them on the open trail, hand in hand, eyes set on a future no one else could define, knew the truth. It wasn't a tale of vengeance. It was a tale of freedom, and of love forged in fire. And it was only the beginning.